Biggest 49ers week of the season, so we have a big-time guest. That is former 49ers quarterback Jeff Garcia. How you doing, Jeff?
Hey, I'm good, David. Thanks for having me on, my man.
Where are you at? That background looks nice behind you. Big window.
I'm in Southern California. I'm in a little spot north of San Diego called Encinitas, and got a little view of the ocean back there. It's probably hard to tell with the sun setting, but beautiful views here. Fortunate to be in a great spot and raising my 4 kids and having a lot of fun doing it down here.
And I'm sure you've been keeping up on the 49ers. They're headed semi your direction, right? They'll be headed south for the game against the Rams here in week 18. Not quite all the way down to San Diego, but boy, this is a big one. You played in a lot of big ones. What are your thoughts entering this game? Because it might be do or die for the 49ers.
Oh, it is do or die. They have to win. They can't count on anything else happening with New Orleans losing or whatever the case may be, the scenarios. They need to handle their business. They need to go out there and show that they're capable of putting together a full 60-minute game in all 3 aspects of the game: offense, defense, and special teams. And I think that there have been times where during this season we've seen some great things out of the 49ers. Looked like they were starting to get their mojo back and be that team. And then all of a sudden they fall off of that consistency pace or trail. And that's the key to being successful in this game. You have to be consistent. Yes, you're going to have injuries. Yes, unfortunately, we're dealing with a different era, different time with COVID and losing players to that. And so how do you adjust? How do you overcome those type of situations? Well, that'll be interesting to see how the 49ers do it this weekend. Now, they've had the Rams number lately. Kyle Shanahan has done a great job of preparing this team to play against McVay and the Rams, and they've been able to overcome them, whether they've been the less explosive team or not. They played the Rams exceptionally well. Now, the Rams are a bit of a different team this year as well, with Matthew Stafford, with obviously the weapons. Cooper Kupp, with what he's been able to do this year, has been amazing. But the guys that he has at his disposal create some problems. So it'll be interesting to see how the 49ers adjust and adapt defensively, how they're able to overcome whatever missing pieces they have in the secondary. That's going to be critical come this Sunday. But the most important factor is going to be that quarterback play. How does Trey Lance handle this game? How does Jimmy Garoppolo handle the game if he has an opportunity to be back on the field? And how does Kyle work both them into the picture and create a dynamic that can be explosive and can be positive for the 49ers offense?
You know, it's fascinating because you rewind back to the preseason and even before then, when Kyle Shanahan was on the private jet going home from Columbus, Ohio, from Justin Fields' pro day, John Lynch said that he was already drawing up plays for Trey Lance. And obviously, in retrospect, we know that they're also planning on keeping Jimmy Garoppolo. So when you go back to that, and then you go back to the preseason and training camp when the 49ers were kind of mixing and matching both of them, at some point, Kyle Shanahan was obviously very interested in playing both of these quarterbacks this year. Now, he got away from that for various reasons. There were injuries to both of them at the start of the year. Obviously, Garoppolo got into a rhythm. Trey rode the bench for a while. But seasons change, right? You've played in the NFL, Jeff. You know that these seasons are long, grueling novels, and every week is a chapter. And the chapter in Tennessee dealt the 49ers something they weren't expecting when Jimmy Garoppolo got hurt. And I just have to think that now, given the fact that Trey showed so much, right? I mean, he developed over the 3 months that we didn't see him. And we saw that progress against Houston. And the fact that Jimmy Garoppolo's back out at practice, I have to think that maybe Kyle Shanahan is thinking that he'll play both of these guys against the Rams. At least every single option seems to be on the table. To me, it seems like one of those Game 7 of the World Series types games where all hands do have to be on deck.
Yeah, you can't hold anything back in this situation. I think from a head coaching standpoint, especially an offensive-minded coach, you probably get into a rhythm during a game where it's difficult to really truly decide on what's the best scenario to give this other player opportunities. Now, when they drafted Trey Lance and they had Jimmy coming back, I looked at it as a perfect opportunity to create packages for each game where they would be critical moments in the game where you can substitute Trey Lance and give him 2 snaps on a 3rd and 1, 4th and 1. You could give him snaps on the goal line or inside the 5-yard line. You can give him snaps where you need a little different personnel at that position to give you different opportunities, a different dynamic. What Trey Lance can do with his legs, Jimmy Garoppolo just cannot do. And we know that. And he knows that. But you get into a point in the game where you're so focused on trying to create success for one guy, you probably lose track, or you're almost afraid to roll the dice to give the other kid the opportunity because you don't want it to backfire. And then you're having to answer questions. Well, he didn't get as many reps during the week of practice. Why are you throwing him in such a critical situation? Well, we prepared him for this situation. He knew that this was his opportunity. He has 10 plays to focus on that are his package, and we knew we were going in and going to be utilizing that. You're right, though. There were injuries that took place. Trey Lance got injured early when he had the opportunity against Arizona, and maybe the things just didn't ever materialize. The shame is you see every other quarterback that was drafted in the first round this season, whether they were before Trey or after Trey, they've gotten critical snaps. They've gotten a lot of snaps. And yes, Justin Fields has probably been the one guy that has not played as much as the other 3, but Trey Lance has played the least of all 5. And I would have thought, especially with the direction that this team could be going, with the transition at the quarterback position, preparing an up-and-coming guy, a young guy, a guy that you spent the number 3 pick in the draft on, that there would have been opportunities to prepare him so that if this position does happen, where now he's got to start a game. He's already experienced so many critical moments against good football teams leading up to this situation on Sunday. It'll be interesting to see how things go. I think if Jimmy can practice and shows that he's healthy enough, I think it would be hard for Kyle to not have Jimmy as his starter just because he knows what Jimmy is capable of. He knows what he's going to get with Jimmy. He knows how to call a game with Jimmy because he's been doing it for the 4 years that Jimmy has been with the 49ers. He's not quite there with Trey Lance yet. He's still kind of learning what Trey's going to do in certain situations, how he's going to handle the pocket, how he's going to handle things outside the pocket. We know what he's capable of. We know the abilities that he has within himself, but how is he going to apply that when the game is on the line? He's had a couple opportunities this year, so he's had a couple trials, and he's gotten to see a little bit of that. But I just think that with the way the situation is, with the veteran being Jimmy, with the young guy being Trey, if Jimmy's healthy enough to go, I just don't see Kyle holding Jimmy back off the field.
But is it possible there might be some middle ground between those two, that Jimmy might be 70, 75%, or even Jimmy starts the game 90%. He's feeling good with the thumb, but he gets hit by Aaron Donald in the middle of the game. And then all of a sudden he's not so close to 100%. And I think in that scenario, which isn't totally implausible because the Rams can rush the passer and Jimmy Garoppolo is not going to be 100%. We know the extent of this injury. It's a torn ligament in his thumb. So he's not going to be 100%. To me, it seems that there is some kind of gray area here where you might get a little bit of Garoppolo, but you'll also need a little bit of Lance to get through this game. And I think get weird, right?
I think if Jimmy isn't anywhere close to 90%, if he's at 75% or less, 85% or less is not a good Jimmy. He's not going to be a mobile guy. We already know that. He's going to be stuck in the pocket. If he doesn't have his accuracy, if he doesn't have the confidence in throwing the football accurately, on time, to the location that he needs to throw it to, then he's not any good for us. We can't take that chance. There have been too many times this season where Jimmy just hasn't been consistent enough, especially with this being his 8th year in the league, right around that, something along those lines.
8 or 9.
Yeah, and so there have been decisions that he has made that have been costly in games, and you cannot continue to make those. And I think just like the Baker Mayfield situation, here was a quarterback that was on the decline physically because of injuries, and it affected his decision-making mentally. Wasn't the same guy making decisions. Was almost afraid to pull the trigger in certain ways. Timing was off. Decision-making was off. Mental process of what was going on was off. Is that due to because the fact that he's injured, he's playing a little scared, he's a little gun-shy, he's not real sure of himself, he almost feels like he needs to be perfect in every situation, every decision? Quarterbacks can't afford to play like that. Game happens too fast. You have to read and react. You almost have to be ahead of the reaction in order to make the play a positive. And if you're struggling physically, if you're not confident that you can make the throw, that you're a little bit off, it's going to affect everything else. It's going to affect the mindset, which is going to affect the decision-making, which is going to affect the accuracy or the critical errors that come into play. So because of that, I'm only saying Kyle will go with Jimmy if he thinks he's close to 100%. And due to the fact that, like you said, it's a ligament issue, it's in his thumb, on his throwing hand, he may not be able to overcome that. We're seeing that in practice this week. But yes, Trey's getting probably half the reps, if not more. And it's going to be important that, hey, no matter what happens on Sunday, both quarterbacks need to be able to be focused and ready to go. Now it's on coach to make the decision. Hey, is Jimmy close to 90 plus? And I can be confident in him that he's going to go out there and play without thinking about the thumb and be aware of what he has to do? Or do I just go with Trey? Trey's ready. He's dynamic. I have a game plan for him. Hey, we'll put him in positions to be successful, and that's who we have to ride with. It's a critical
decision. You know what's it is, and the mercurial nature of Garoppolo's play this year, to me, we talk about the inconsistencies, and they're all like really clumped together, right? And that's been damaging for the 49ers in games like Seattle, both times against Tennessee, right, where he threw those 2 picks. But then you have the clean games from Jimmy Garoppolo, and you could see the vision that Kyle Shanahan has. A great example was the first Rams game in week 10, 15-19. He doesn't throw a lot, but he was money on those third downs to allow the 49ers to run 44 times. What do you see in Jimmy in between the good games and the bad games? Is there a rhyme or reason to why the 49ers can get good Jimmy one week, but then the guy that will throw those 2 picks that make you wonder and really hurt them in any other week?
Yeah, I really think it comes down to just how he processes information, his pre-snap read, what he's focused upon, how he sees defenses rotate. I know many of his interceptions this year came on just a lack of recognition of rotation. And all of a sudden, a safety being in the middle of the field or a linebacker dropping into his zone and him just not being aware and throwing into coverage, which led to turnovers, which led to poor decisions, those sort of things. Is it a matter of he's not seeing rotation, he's not recognizing safeties? Is he being a robot? Hey, I'm taught that this is what I see in the pre-snap. I'm already eliminating certain things. Well, as we know, as NFL quarterbacks, every defense is going to show a little different picture. They're not going to truly give you exactly what they do. There are certain teams that you can start to basically corner in the sense that, hey, they run 2 or 3 coverages. There aren't as many teams that are like the old Tampa where they ran 3 coverages. They ran cover 2 Tampa with the Mike linebacker running down the middle. They ran cover 3 zone, or they played cover 1 man, meaning single safety man throughout. They were simple, but they were effective because they did it so well. Same thing with the Seattle Seahawks. They went through a phase where they were pretty much all single safety middle. It was going to be zone or it was going to be man. Linebackers drop to the same spot every time. Well, teams start to get different, start to change up their looks. And for me, with Jimmy, is he processing? Is he seeing the field? Is he missing opportunities? When I talk about missing opportunities, I'm talking about a pre-snap alert and a post-snap alert. Do I see a matchup that I like? Do I want to take a shot over the field? We don't see him stretch the field a whole lot. We don't see a lot of just straight go throws. We see manufactured play action, deep throws where, hey, the tight end crosses shallow and then breaks down the sideline, or the fullback, Juszczyk, does the same thing. There was a critical miss in that Tennessee game of Juszczyk wide open on the sideline. If you just throw it to him, he probably scores.
Yeah, he was wide open.
Touchdown, not getting that was a critical miss in that game. Situations in the Seattle game. You do a heck of a job moving the ball down the field. You get first down inside the 10-yard line. Now, I'm not putting this all on Jimmy, but from a coaching perspective, did we get too conservative running the football on first and second down? And now we put ourselves in a difficult situation on 3rd and 5, 4th and 5, whatever the case may be. And now that's on Jimmy to make a great decision and a great throw in a tight window. You know, and we lost that game probably as a team and as a coaching staff, I believe, because we did get conservative in those final 4 downs when we got close to the end zone. I don't care if you leave a minute on the clock for Russell Wilson or 30 seconds. Your defense has to make a stop. Rely on your defense making a stop. Let's just score a touchdown. If it happens on first down, it happens on first down. That being said, you know, there are things from a quarterback that I would love to see in the quarterback meeting room in San Francisco and on the practice field. How do you play from within the pocket? When I see Jimmy play, he gets to the end of his drop and he's stagnant. There's no hitch up in the pocket. There's no attack in the line of scrimmage. There's no feet going in one direction for number 1, feet going to number 2, number 3, and then I'm off and running. It's stagnant at the end of the drop, 7 yards deep. That's why he gets sacked so much. He puts a lot of pressure on his offensive tackles. Defensive ends know where he's going to set up. They know that if we just keep the pocket tight, condense it, there's nowhere for him to go. He's not a scare for us to worry about as far as extending the play or getting outside the pocket. So we could just squeeze the pocket, push it from the front, squeeze it from the back, and now we've got him locked in like a caged dog.
Well, Kyle Shanahan obviously wanted mobility when he traded up to number 3. And I think, you know, that was all over the fingerprints of this trade, right? Was the desire to take Kyle Shanahan's offense to the next level. And we know Mike Shanahan is Kyle's dad. So Kyle learned from him, and Mike Shanahan coached your predecessor with the 49ers, Steve Young, as the offensive coordinator there in the early 90s. And then he had John Elway. And those are both great examples of quarterbacks that have worked in this system, who are also mobile. And obviously the system has evolved over the years, but it's still based in that outside zone run game. That's still so important to the 49ers. But when the quarterback also has legs, and the quarterback also has a howitzer for an arm, as we've seen from Trey Lance already on the field. I mean, he made some really, really impressive throws against the Houston Texans. It completely changes the way that defenses play. So we see what Kyle Shanahan envisions as the ceiling for this offense in the future. And I think it's really high with Trey Lance. But there's obviously a lot of development to go to get to that ceiling. So with that established, what did you think of what Trey showed in week 5 against Arizona, when he was obviously still really raw and what he showed in week 17 against Houston, where I thought the game plan was different. He was much more comfortable in the pocket. And obviously there was a lot of progress made in those 3 months. What was your take on the behind the scenes work that Lance did that he obviously showcased against the Texans?
Well, I think he definitely showed confidence and showed the ability to make good decisions, to grow within the system, to utilize the system as far as making great choices, being accurate with the football, being a good decision maker, still threw a pick. But, that being said, it was two different teams too. You're talking about the Arizona Cardinals, who at the time when San Fran played them, they were a hot team. They were playing great football. They were one of the top defense in the National Football League, explosive offensively. Then you go to the Houston Texans, a team coming off of a big win that was very surprising versus the LA Chargers, but not a great football team, a team that is looking for its own identity, has gone through multiple quarterbacks, has gone through their own share of problems this year. And, the 49ers went out and did what they should do to a team like that. They took advantage of the opportunity. They were stronger. They were more aggressive. It took a little while to get going. It was a slow first half. But from the standpoint of his personal growth, I thought that he handled the game well. I don't think he was exceptionally exciting or played out of his mind, but he did what he needed to do in order for that team to win a football game. This is going to be a whole different atmosphere come Sunday in LA, which I plan to be there with my kids.
Nice.
Hey, root for the Niners, being part of the Niner faithful, but it's going to be exciting, because everything's on the line. I mean, the Rams got a chip because they know the 49ers have had their way with them over the past 3 seasons. And the Niners need this. They need this to get back into the playoffs. And so it's going to be a heck of a ball game. It's going to be a heck of a crowd, a heck of an environment there in SoFi. And it will be interesting if Trey is the guy to see how he handles the situation, to see if the situation is bigger than him, bigger than he is. I think if he goes out there and he plays within himself, they utilize the run game to build the play action movement game. To be able to have a quarterback that can play sideline to sideline, end zone to end zone, like Trey is capable of doing, like a Patrick Mahomes does, where he puts pressure on a defense from sideline to sideline and end zone to end zone. Trey's that type of guy. Is he there yet? No. He has work to do and progress to make. But he can be that type of guy that threatens you on the edge, threatens you up the middle, threatens you in all aspects, in all areas of the game. You gotta be good in your decisions, and when there's a mistake, you can't dwell on the mistake. STM, short-term memory, you gotta move on.
He had that against the Texans. I was really impressed that he was able to bounce back from that interception. And, you see a lot of quarterbacks, especially with Shanahan. This happened a lot with Mullins and Beathard. They would look good with the opening game script, and then they would fall off in the second half. I think you'd rather have it the other way around, right? You'd rather have the guy struggle early, but build as the game went along. And that's what Trey Lance did against the Texans. He bounced back from the pick. You talk about the impressive throws. I really love that slant to Ayuk, that Ayuk bounced off the tackler and ran for 40 yards downfield. And then everybody's going to be talking about the deep one to Deebo Samuel, which I thought Trey placed in such a way that the cornerback had no chance to get it. He almost slightly, intentionally underthrew it, even though it was a deep ball, and Deebo could come back to it and the corner didn't. I thought that was a small nuance to Trey Lance's game that we hadn't necessarily seen before, that he probably was working on over those past 3 months. But if I had one concern, Jeff, and I think Shanahan has the same concern, it's that Trey Lance needs to hit the gimmies that he gets early in the game. And Shanahan's going to scheme up some gimmies, right? A good example was that one in the flat to Kyle Juszczyk. It was a completion, yes, but Juszczyk had to reach down into the ground to get it. And he stumbled and he only got 2 yards, and he probably would have gotten 5 or 6 had it hit him in stride. Because of that, the 49ers faced 2nd and 8 instead of 2nd and 5, and they ended up punting right on that possession. So as a quarterback, it must be harder. I mean, I haven't played quarterback in the NFL. This is why I'm asking you this, but it must be a lot harder than it looks on TV to hit that quick gimme at the start of a game. What can Trey Lance do to make sure that he's hitting on the short game, since that's so important within the context of Kyle Shanahan's scheme, given the fact that he's already succeeding in some of the longer game?
So much of it is footwork, it's timing, it's rhythm. When it comes down to being accurate as a quarterback, not every throw you're going to be able to have your feet under you, and you're going to have to learn to work your arm from all different angles, much like Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers can make every throw accurately, and his feet could be facing all different directions. Not everybody is capable of that right now. And I think especially for a young guy, it's critical to get your body, to get your feet going in the right direction, to throw on time, to throw with rhythm. When you do that, your window, your margin for error is very small in the National Football League. And what the 49ers are so great at are yards after catch. And if you can hit them in stride, hit them in that small 12-inch by 12-inch window right here and keep them going, you have a chance for so much more productivity. When you force a guy to catch a ball at his feet, to lay out, to reach above his head, to expose him, it's going to put your guys in difficult situations, and they're probably not going to be as productive. You're not going to be as productive. So that's something that always has to be worked on. It doesn't start on game day. It's every day in practice with directional throws, hitting a hand. Guys are putting their hands in different places, and you're throwing your ball right there on point because your feet are going in the right direction. Your hips are facing the right direction. Everything starts from your feet and works their way up. Your eyes are telling you one thing. Your feet are following through with your eyes. Your arm follows your feet, your hips. And, hey, that's how we can be as accurate as possible. Now, as things go along, you're going to have to make the off-balance throws. You're going to have to throw with people in your face. You may have to jump over someone to make a throw. Those things are going to happen. But more oftentimes than not, 60 to 70% of the time, you're throwing from within the pocket. And if you can do it the correct way, using proper mechanics, getting your feet going in the right direction, stepping in the target location, and everything else can follow, you can be a more accurate quarterback. And that's something young guys have to continue to work on. The game is so much faster in the National Football League than it ever was in the collegiate level. And so adapting and adjusting to that, where your feet are moving faster, your decision is faster, your arm has to get going faster. All those things have to speed up. So how do you control that? How do you slow it down but yet speed it up, if you know what I'm saying?
That's a great point. And with everything going faster, those are so many variables that you have to adjust to. Trey Lance had a total of 318 college pass attempts, and that happened at a level that's even slower than D1, right? That happened at North Dakota State. So really, the fact that he has made the progress that we think we've already seen this year, I think is remarkable, because he didn't play throughout almost all of the 2020 calendar year. Due to COVID, they moved their season to the spring, and he only played one game before the draft. So he came out as an eminently raw prospect. But Kyle loved the fact that he was able to manage the game in college. Everybody on YouTube sees the runs. They see him trucking guys that are going to be future accountants, right? They're not going to play in the NFL beyond that level. That's all great and makes Trey Lance's highlight reel awesome. But what Kyle liked was the fact that he was going, to the right place with the ball consistently, that he was lining up under center. He was running some play action in college. And it seems to me that we already see signs of that translating, those mechanics translating into Kyle Shanahan's system. How hard was it for you, Jeff, to go from, not only college, but the CFL to the NFL and a Bill Walsh system, where obviously there was a lot of under center work? I know it was a different time in the game, so maybe you had some of that under center stuff, at levels prior. But for you, as far as the small intricacies went, what was the hardest part of the adjustment?
Oh, absolutely. I went from the college game where I was under center 100% of the time to the Canadian Football League game where I was probably under center 20% of the time and was always in shotgun. And your footwork was so different than the rhythm passing that happens in the States with the collegiate game at the time and the NFL game. Now, the NFL has adapted to what college does with so many things, and the spread offense and the shotgun and not being under center as much, especially some teams are hardly under center at all. But that being said, for me, coming back to the NFL, the dimensions of the game changed again. In the CFL, I had more width, I had more length, I had a bigger end zone. Yes, I had one more player on each side of the ball, but there was more room to work with, bigger windows of opportunity. All of a sudden, the NFL game, things were that much faster, windows closed that much quicker. You had to be ahead of it. Your footwork had to be on point, especially in the West Coast system at the time, where your foot, speed, tempo, depth, stretch of your drop, all was dedicated to what the route combination was. So different route combinations required a different depth or tempo of your drop. It could still be a 5-step drop, but it might be a quick 5 if you're throwing a speed cutout, or it might be a stretch 5 with the hitch to throw a 12-yard hook route. So you had to adjust and adapt to certain play structures and then find out what the defense is doing, find out where they're going, find out if that window is going to open or you have to get to number 2 or number 3 in the progression. And so all those things were happening in the pre-snap and post-snap extremely fast. And that was the biggest transition for me. I struggled initially. I went from having my first start, which was positive, to having 4 really difficult starts. And then I got benched and I had to watch from the sideline. And when I went back into the game, I had made some adjustments. I kind of relieved some of that pressure I was putting on myself to be Steve Young, to be Joe Montana. I had to be me. I had to play the game like I know how to play the game and involve how I was being coached and what I was learning to be able to be successful on the field.
You know, you talk about adjustments, Jeff, and obviously you have to make them over the course of your career and the larger picture. But there was a time about exactly 19 years ago. Yesterday was the anniversary that you had to make the adjustments in the middle of the game. I know that you recognize this picture. I know that the fans who are watching right now recognize this. I know it says 15 years later, but that's because I wrote this a good 4 years ago. It's unbelievable how time flies. Right. But this was the comeback against the Giants. There was a time when you had to make adjustments when you were down 24 points late in the third quarter. I know you did something on NFL Network the other day because they also recognize the anniversary of this. But is this the high point? What was this the high point of your career, this comeback in a 49ers uniform? And we could talk about Bill Walsh and everything surrounding the West Coast offense and your history with him, fellow San Jose State alumnus. But I just have to know if this was the pinnacle for you, because it was such an awesome moment for so many of the fans watching right now.
Right. I mean, for my NFL career, this is the standout game. This was the game that really exemplified what I was capable of, who I was as a player, how I had that never say die attitude, constantly fighting, not only to prove myself, but to lead the team, that never say die mentality. And that game, man, there were so many ups and downs and like a roller coaster of events that took place. And yeah, we found ourselves down big time in that third quarter, late in that third quarter. And actually, when we started that 2-minute drive, it was probably with about 5 minutes left in the third quarter when we got the ball and we decided to go no huddle and just call the plays at the line of scrimmage. And I hit T.O. on that first shallow cross with about 2 minutes left in the quarter, where he was able to break the tackle and get into the end zone. And we followed it up with the 2-point conversion to cut what we thought was an insurmountable lead of 24 points, being down 38-14, to all of a sudden down 38-22, 16 points with the full quarter left to play. And I thought that was a critical score because I think it gave us definitely some hope, gave us a little bit of momentum. We just needed some critical stops by our defense. And like I've spoken about before, it took multiple things to happen. I mean, New York was killing us on offense. They were going up and down the field that game. but they put the brakes on a little bit. They went into a stall mentality, like let's just try to work the clock and run the clock out and keep the ball on the ground. While our defense stepped up, forced some punts, some things fell our way. They missed 2 field goals in the fourth quarter. They had a roughing the punter or roughing the punt returner.
Yeah, I remember that.
There was a personal foul on the punt returner. That was a big 15-yarder for us. I mean, there were some things that definitely went our way that fourth quarter and gave us a chance to make the comeback. It was just an awesome feeling right there in Candlestick to have that moment, to have that experience with the fans who had stayed, who hadn't left the game yet, who were still there, to be able to cheer us on and live that memory, live that experience with us.
Well, as you can see here, you were talking about 38-14, so I pulled it up. At different points of the article, I looked up on Pro Football Reference what the mathematical win percentage was for you guys on that day. And at 38-14, after Jeremy Shockey right here, former Giants tight end, dropped this pass, it could have been the touchdown that sealed it. After he dropped that pass, your win probability was 0.1%. So the Giants had a 99.9% chance of winning that game before it all turned around. And then it obviously had that wild finish. First, you found Ty Streets for the eventual winning touchdown, and then you had that crazy field goal play. As Steve Mariucci later said, bummer for the New York Giants. But after the game, you shared this story with me, Jeff, for this piece. And this is one that I think a lot of 49ers fans haven't heard yet, so maybe it's a good chance to share it with them. But Bill Walsh helped really discover you at the start of your career, right? And then you ran into Bill Walsh in the 49ers locker room after this win. I was hoping that you could kind of share those bookends, those memories of Bill Walsh and how his, the memory of him really surrounded this game.
I have so much to be thankful for Bill in what he meant to my career, meant to my opportunity to play for the 49ers, to get into the NFL. If it wasn't for Bill, I may not have ever gotten that shot, may not have ever had the chance to obviously play for the 49ers. Who knows about the NFL in general? But because of him, because of his role back with the 49ers on the management level, back in 1999, he had a fondness for me from our college days. When he was coaching at Stanford, I was playing at San Jose State. We played against each other. In my senior year, we had a battle against the Cardinal, and it came down to a last-minute drive, and they ended up beating us. But after that game, Bill was very complimentary of me, and he made a comment to the newspaper, to the media, that Garcia kid on the other side of the field did some Joe Montana-like things today. And so I ran into Bill later that season. At the end of the season, I was practicing for the East-West Shrine game at Stanford Stadium on their practice fields, and Bill was out there practicing. My dad was like, "Hey, Jeff, why don't you go up to Bill, introduce yourself, tell him thank you for the kind words that he said about you after the game when you guys played earlier in the season." So I went up to Bill and I said, "Hey, Coach, I'm Jeff Garcia." And he's like, "Hey, I know who you are." And I'm like, "Hey, Coach, thanks for some of the things that you said about me. I really appreciate that." He said, "You know what, man? You are deserving of it. You're a heck of a player. You do remind me of a lot of what Joe and Steve could do on the football field. And this Saturday in this game, this East-West Shrine game, you're going to be the MVP." And I'm like, I was a little bit taken back by Bill saying that. I'm like, "Wow, Bill, hey, I appreciate that, man." So I walked away, and my dad was like, "Oh, what'd he say?" And I'm like, "Oh, he said I'm going to be the MVP this weekend." Well, I went out in that game on Saturday, and I played in the second and fourth quarter of that game. And in the fourth quarter, we're down 28-7. And I rally the West team. I rally the West team from a 28-7 deficit. I throw 3 touchdown passes and run for the 2-point conversion, all in the last 6.5 minutes of the game, to win the game 29-28.
Wow.
And got the vote because the vote was already cast for the MVP of the game prior to the game ending. Well, the media had to recast the vote, so it ended up being a co-MVP, co-offensive MVP of the game, and I was co-offensive MVP with another.
I hate that. Whenever I'm at a big game, they ask me to put my MVP vote in with like 10 minutes to go. It's like, are you guys kidding? They had us do it at the Super Bowl. And this is going to be bad memories for 49ers fans. We cast our MVP votes while the 49ers were ahead by 2 possessions. You can't do that. I mean, now with the internet, they didn't have the internet voting back then for the East-West Shrine game, but now they've got to do away with that practice because you can get the votes in quickly now, right? It's crazy.
I assume so. So who was your MVP? 10 minutes left and the Niners leading? It would have been
I was Garoppolo with 10 minutes left. He was almost perfect. He had like 2 incompletions. He was 19 of 21. He had led him on the drive to go, I think they're up 10, right? And then everything fell apart. I mean, if you look at his split for the first 3 quarters and the fourth quarter, he went something like, I think, 19 of 21, and then he was 2 for 11 the rest of the way. But the MVP voting happened.
Emmanuel Sanders on that post late in the game, then he's still the MVP. You know, it's just game of inches, unfortunately.
Yeah, game of inches. I mean, there were so many moments in that game where if the 49ers had either held defensively or made a play offensively, you win. But they had to make maybe 1 of 6, and they went 0 of 6, you know.
You're right.
And
you're right.
That's just the way that it goes.
Bill was instrumental, man. And after that wild card game, he was in that locker room and he was beaming from ear to ear. And he just came up to me and he basically just expressed how proud of me he was. That, you know, for me, it wasn't just about proving to Bill that he made the right choice. It was really proving to everybody that Bill still knew what he was talking about, that Bill still had an eye for talent, and that he made the right decision and give me a chance to be with the 49ers. And so, you know, I was just, you know, taken back by obviously his presence and what he meant to me and what it meant to my opportunity to play for the San Francisco 49ers, to return home, to play for the childhood team that I grew up watching, idolizing. Being a part of that team in that moment was definitely an all-time thrill for me.
Well, I mean, Gilroy kid, right? And you're in the Candlestick Park locker room after a historic playoff comeback victory over the New York Giants, a team that's obviously been a nemesis of the 49ers in the playoffs. It was before that game and it was after that game because they played in 2011. You lead this comeback and Bill Walsh himself comes up to you in the locker room. I think if that's not a fairy tale story, I don't know what is. You know, when you first told me that story a few years ago, I'm like, I am leading and closing this story with that anecdote right there, just because it's so cool. And, you know, so when you grew up as a fan of the 49ers, what are your memories of, you know, that dynastic rise? What are your memories of Walsh implanting that offense and Joe Montana and then Steve Young doing their things? I mean, to me, I was born in '88, so I remember the Steve Young years, and I remember you playing. I don't remember Montana as much, but to me, in retrospect, it seems there was just intense pressure for the 49ers to win the Super Bowl every single year because they built it up for themselves, right? They were so good that only perfection was really accepted by the community and the fan base due to their own standard.
Sure. I think that first Super Bowl, they really surprised a lot of people. I don't think anybody thought that in, I think Joe's, third year of being in the NFL? I mean, he was still relatively young. You had a relatively young team. You had a very dynamic core of defensive backs, but we're all young and wet behind the ears. But they were amazing. And once they followed Bill's system, how he preached, how he coached, how everything was structured as to how you play offense, how you play defense, and everybody bought into that. I remember watching the catch against the Dallas Cowboys. I remember being at home, being on the edge of my seat, watching Joe Montana run sprint right option and Dwight Clark work the back of the end zone and make that catch. I remember watching that first Super Bowl out there at Stanford Stadium against the Dolphins.
Dolphins, yeah, Marino.
Carl Monroe, who caught a touchdown pass in that game, who was from Overfelt High School in San Jose, played for my dad at Gavilan Junior College, and used to be my yard duty in elementary school during lunchtime. And he and the other football players that were our yard duties when we were 10, 11, 12-year-old kids, 5th and 6th grade, we'd play football at lunch. We'd grab onto these guys' belt loops, and they'd start running, and we'd have to, like, keep up with them. They would, like, lead us to the end zone. But I grew up watching my dad's football teams and seeing this guy, Carl Monroe, who was awesome in junior college, go on to college at the University of Utah, go on to play for the San Francisco 49ers, catch a little halfback corner in the end zone on his fingertips on the right sideline and go down the sideline for a touchdown. We were going crazy because it was like, wow, we know that guy. He was our friend. He was our yard duty. He was our player for my dad. So I followed that and followed Joe. And obviously then Jerry Rice came into the picture. But Ronnie Lott and Dwight Hicks and Eric Wright and Williamson and Keena Turner and Guy McIntyre and Sapolu and all these, Randy Cross, Dwight Clark, all these great Niners that I used to watch, and Taylor, John Taylor. I mean, the list goes on. So many great players that came through that team in the 80s and 90s, that to grow up in the Bay Area, how could you not be a fan? You were blessed to have such great football right there in your backyard. And to be honest with you, not everybody's going to like this, but I was just a fan of Bay Area sports. Being an hour south, 70 miles south of San Francisco, 70 miles south of Oakland. I mean, I grew up with Ken Stabler, Cliff Branch, Mark Van Egan, Dave Casper, Ted Hendricks, Matuzak, Lester Hayes, all those great Raiders from the 70s and 80s. I remember going to training camp accidentally. We're on a summer vacation, just traveling up Northern California. We stop at a hotel in Santa Rosa. It happens to be the Raiders. Guys are walking around. I'm like 7, 8 years old. They're walking around the hotel, and I'm like, oh, my God, the Raiders are here. These big, tall monsters. I'm like, this is awesome. We're here with the Raiders. But that being said, we were blessed with so much great football through the 70s, 80s, and 90s with, who knows what, probably 8 Super Bowls that were won, 3, I think, by the Raiders, 3 or 4 by the Raiders, and 5 by the Niners in that span of time.
It was a golden era. It was a golden era.
As kids growing up in the Bay Area, we were blessed to have greatness around us.
So then you have to be the guy that follows that up for the 49ers. You have Montana and Young, and we talk now about how crazy the scrutiny on the 49ers quarterback position is. It's obviously under the spotlight right now with both Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance on this team at the same time. The pressure cooker is as high as it's ever been because the 49ers are about to play a make-or-break game against their division rivals in Week 18. But you have personal experience being in that pressure cooker. I know it was before Twitter and all that social media, but what was it like from a standpoint of expectations? Did were there people writing you letters? Or would people see you in the store and have a comment? Because Steve Young has talked about how tough it was to follow Joe Montana. You had to follow both Steve Young and Joe Montana. What was that like?
Well, I think fortunately for me, I was 29 years old when I started that process. So I was a little bit more mature. I'd gone through a similar situation in Canada on a smaller scale, but a similar situation in the sense that I followed one of the all-time CFL greats in Doug Flutie, who would end up being a CFL Hall of Famer, who was a Grey Cup multi-time winner, was a multi-time MVP up in Canada. So I had a little bit of experience with that. Now, doesn't necessarily compare to following 2 Hall of Famers, 2 Super Bowl quarterbacks, 2 MVPs in Super Bowls in Joe and Steve, and just the ginormous feat that was, so to speak, of trying to fill those shoes. And I think more than anything, what hurt me early on was the pressure that I put on myself to be that guy, to keep that lineage going, and almost sort of try to be like those guys, to play like them. And I had to first learn the game, relearn the game in ways, because I was coming from Canada to the NFL. I had to learn the system. I had to get confident in my own ability to be able to process and play within that system. And like I said, my first start was against the Tennessee Titans. Yeah, my first game experience really was a second half on Monday Night Football against Arizona after Steve went down. But my first start was at home against Tennessee, who was a good football team, who would go on to the Super Bowl that year and lose to the Rams. But I played lights out. I threw for 2 touchdowns. I ran for a touchdown. I passed for 60+% completion percentage. I think I had close to 300 total yards in the game. I'm like, this is easy, man. I could do this. And I was fired up.
Famous last words.
Slowly the wheels started to fall off, right? Struggles hit, and hey, D coordinators start watching film on you, and they start doing things that you haven't seen before, and they're surprising you, and they're changing up things at the line of scrimmage. And so I had to learn quickly. And, you know, I evolved during that season. After a low point, I was able to somewhat turn it around and play decent football. And then it led to a second year where I played lights out, went to the Pro Bowl in that second season, set a 49er record for passing yards that still stands today. Threw for 30+ touchdowns and limited my mistakes with, 10 or 11 interceptions in that season. And we still didn't win a lot of games, but we were making progress. And then the third year is when we really turned the corner and went 12-4 and got into the playoffs, and the confidence really grew, and I felt comfortable and I felt good with the direction that we were going. And I think that it was unfortunate in the sense that the team was really headed in the right direction. We were a young team. Once again, I thought Mooch and the management and the coaching staff had rebuilt the team to where we had good players. We were solid. We were balanced on offense. We had a great running game. We had a good passing game. We had threats on the outside. And then there's the coaching change. They fire Mariucci after the 4th season, going into the second round of the playoffs. After that playoff win against the Giants, we lose to Tampa, who wins the Super Bowl that year, and then Mooch is gone. And the biggest struggle in the NFL is inconsistency. And we see it with teams throughout the league that continue to struggle year in and year out. In Cleveland, Detroit, Jacksonville, you see constant change in management, constant change in coaching staffs, constant change in the quarterback position. You just don't see teams that are competitive on a weekly basis. And we fell into that. And unfortunately, I only had one more season with the Niners before they released me. And then I was on to other locations. But those 5 years, especially 4 of those 5 years under Mariucci, man, we had grown. We had turned the table. We were competitive. We went into Green Bay in a wild card game at 12-4. We were on the heels of the Rams. And the Rams were one of the best teams in the National Football League that year. But that in those years with the greatest show on turf and Warner and all the guys that he had at his disposal. But we were on their heels. And we went into Green Bay and lost a nail-biter in 6-degree weather to Brett Favre and the Packers. We were right there in that game. And the next year we come back and we win the Giant game at home. And, man, I think if we were able to keep that team together, keep that coaching staff together, I think we were on our way to being like those 49er great teams of the past. We were competitive like those teams again. It was a play here, a play there that were the difference makers in games. It wasn't because, hey, we were so bad in the first half, we were out of it by halftime. We were in every football game. And it's a shame that it came to an end, because I think we had what it took to get to that level and to be that team had all the pieces stayed in place.
Yeah, you guys had that swagger, that personality. I remember Jeremy Newberry, one of your offensive linemen. He's been so fun to talk to about some of these former teams. One of those guys that had everybody's back, right? And you have to have that collection of personalities on the team. And it's almost like a forgotten era a little bit in 49ers history, because everybody always talks about the Super Bowl team. But that's why I wanted to really highlight what you guys were able to do in the playoffs against the Giants that year, because a random collection of guys is not able to come down from 24 points and win a game. There had to be something there, right? Then unfortunately, I think you guys ran into a buzzsaw in the next week that featured the current GM, right? John Lynch was still in Tampa that year.
Yeah.
So talk about that coming full circle. But I agree with you. I thought that the franchise was headed in a good direction. I was watching as a kid. I was 14, 15 years old at the time. And then it all kind of crumbled. All the star players went off elsewhere. And there were a lot of dark years up until 2011, right? When the 49ers played the Giants in the playoffs again. So,
right.
One other parallel, though, that I just thought about, you come to the 49ers in 99. Obviously, you're not expecting to start, but you end up starting because Steve Young gets hurt. What was your relationship like with Steve Young? Because we see it right now with Trey Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo. They're very complimentary of each other. Trey says that he's learned a lot from Jimmy. How much of a resource was Steve for you early in your 49ers tenure there to get off on the right track and eventually do the great things that you did?
Steve and I have a good relationship, and I think it evolved more so after that season. And the unfortunate part of that whole year was what Steve was going through. He had a lot of critical decisions that he had to make for his future. Obviously, all the testing that he probably was going through as to where his brain function was due to the concussions that he had sustained. So there was a lot of time away from the facility that he was spending taking care of his own business. And so because of that, we didn't really have him in the meeting rooms. We didn't have him on the field with us during practice as much as maybe I would have liked for my own growth as a quarterback, to really be able to tap into his mentality, to tap into his understanding, how he processed the game, the decisions that he would make in certain situations during a game, how he would just play the game. And I only had really 3 games to watch him do that. I had a training camp to be able to watch and learn from him. And that was a blessing. Believe me, it was a blessing to be able to be a teammate of his, to be able to watch him and see what he was capable of doing, even at that age and that experience of what he had in the game. And he probably had another 2-3 years left in him had he not suffered what would be the game-ending concussion, had he not had an issue with the head trauma. And from a standpoint of just being able to be there for a young quarterback group, because of the circumstances, it just didn't happen. It didn't really evolve that way. He was able to come back toward the end of the season, be more involved. I think once he had an understanding of where he was, what was going on in his life, what the future or what the direction was with him in football. And I'm sure it was difficult. I'm sure it was a difficult pill to swallow. It wasn't how he wanted to leave the game. But he did come around. He did come back around. He was traveling with us to games on the road. He was on the sideline trying to be an aid to us because we had a young quarterback group. And, we were all local college quarterbacks. And imagine that the Spartan was starting over the Cardinal and the Cal Bear quarterback. That
was the Bay Area room, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a Bay Area room, man. We had Stenstrom from Stanford.
Yeah.
We had Pat Barnes from Cal Berkeley. Those were our 3 quarterbacks. Talk about local talent coming in to play for the pro team, right? But the Spartan was at the top.
Spartan up, baby.
Man.
I just now realized that looking back on it, because I wasn't involved. Obviously, I was too young. I ended up going to college. I went to Stanford. So unfortunately, that game doesn't happen every year anymore. And that was one of my favorites. I mean, you talked about that's how you got connected to Bill Walsh in the first place, right? Playing, almost beating Stanford, and Bill Walsh, the coach there at the time, being so complimentary of you. So there's a great tradition of Stanford against San Jose State that unfortunately we don't see because I think it's a money issue. I think that neither team is scheduling each other because of college football politics, which is just too bad because you hear that awesome story of you and Bill Walsh. But that's also a cool story, with Steve Young. I mean, I've talked to Mike Shanahan about this, and Mike told me you have to go ask Steve, how close was he to coming and playing for me in Denver? And I guess it was pretty close if you talk to both of them, because Elway was retiring at the time. That was Elway's last season, I believe, was 99, right? The Broncos won that Super Bowl.
I believe so.
Yeah. So Shanahan needed a new QB to succeed Elway. So he wanted to go back to Steve Young, who he coached with the 49ers back in 94. And right. Steve decided that it was time to move on. He said he was medically cleared, but and he doesn't regret the decision. He wanted to start his family and kind of move on to the next chapter of his life. And, I'm sure, from you've played in this game, you played quarterback. I'm sure that there's some severe hits out there, right? It's probably hard to get up after some of those hits, especially back when you played, because you guys weren't nearly as protected as the quarterbacks are now.
Yeah, I mean, as you see, I think my nose it's pretty crooked. I've broken that a couple times out there on the field, but no, protecting the QB like there is today. And it's not to say that they just still don't get hit viciously. They still do. But guys are penalized now more often than not when they deliver certain blows. But back in the day, man, it was a pride thing for me. I had to get up unless something was broken or I just physically could not rise again. I was going to bounce up, and I was not a guy who slid either. I was a guy who always dove head first, trying to get the extra yard. I would dive at guys' legs, or I'd dive between them. I would not slide. And that was just me and my mentality. It kills me. It kills me today when I see a quarterback slide a yard before the first down. It kills me when he does that. And I know, hey, guys are protecting themselves, but sometimes they end up getting a blow that's a lot harder and rougher when they slide too late, and it ends up being a problem. That being said, playing today, it's still such a physical game. You're never going to take the violence out of the game. It is what it is. I know that Roger Goodell, I know that the rules committee tries to create a safer environment. It's just difficult to do when the object of the game is to jar that ball loose from the guy who's holding on to it. And in order to do that, you need to deliver a blow with your all-out physicality and mentality. And so that being said, that's what kind of makes it the most exciting game or sport played in the world because of that. And I was blessed to play it for a long time, and I was blessed to be able to walk away fairly healthy mentally and physically. And I try to stay active today just to make sure that all those old little injuries don't creep up on me.
Stave them away, stiff arm, all that old soreness coming up on you. No, I love it. And, I think the fans really fell in love with your style of play. I still remember my kind of favorite stylistic play of yours. You did it a lot. Was that kind of like little jump throw? You would have and I think it was always when you're moving away from pressure, and quarterbacks, I think fans, especially back then, before we got all these mobile quarterbacks now, fans were so used to these rigid quarterbacks. And I know it was different with Steve Young, obviously, but around the league, you had a lot of rigid quarterbacks, 5-step drop, mechanical throw. But you had this, it was like another tool that you had in the toolbox where you're able to run and kind of just pull up. And you know what I'm talking about? That little jump throw that you had? I'm wondering where you developed that. I've always wondered throughout all these years, and I've never seen you talk about it in an interview.
Well, it's funny because I remember in a show called Beyond the Glory, which you can watch on YouTube, and it's 5 segments of my football life, basically, but it's really with the 49ers. And Bill Walsh talks in that. He's interviewed. Steve Mariucci is interviewed. But they show some college highlights. And there's a play where I scramble and there's defenders coming my way, and I jump up above them and I throw a crossing pass about 10, 12 yards down the field. Right on point, right? But it was something that I think just was created out of necessity. If I wasn't going to be able to outrun the guy to the sideline and get around him, but yet I still saw receivers who were working to get open, I had to create a throwing lane. And the only way I could create that was by jumping up and exposing myself, but yet putting me above the defender to create the passing lane.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was just something that became instinctive for me. Yeah, it put me in a very compromised position to where I could get my lights knocked out of me, and probably why I got hit under the chin so many times and have split my chin literally 15 plus times playing the game of football was probably because I opened myself up like that and caught a helmet under the chin multiple times. But I did whatever it took to get a completion. And if it meant jumping, if it meant sidearm, if it meant flicking it like an option pass or a no-look pass, I was going to do it.
That's awesome. Well, I have to finish this by bringing it back to the present day, because we talk about these high physicality games. You're talking about getting your head busted in with a jump throw. And it just reminds me that George Kittle just said a couple hours ago when we asked him about this game, he said he thought it was going to be a body bag game against the Rams. So let's fast forward back to Sunday. You're going to be at the game. This is a division matchup. A lot's going to be on the line. The Rams are going for a division title. The 49ers are fighting for a playoff spot. You couldn't ask for more to be at stake, right? The 49ers, when I hear body bag game and I hear you talking about all this physicality back in the 90s and the 2000s in the NFL, that gets me fired up, and it makes me think that the 49ers are happy to have guys like Kittle, like Deebo Samuel on their team, guys who like administering contact and knocking guys' mouth guards out. I don't want to answer this question for you, but I want to hear what you think is going to happen on Sunday. And I'm just offering my opinion. I think that the 49ers, because they have these guys that like to administer punishment, I believe that's very correlated to their recent success against the Rams. They've won 5 straight against the Rams. Do you agree with me? And what do you think is going to happen this Sunday when the 49ers head into SoFi?
I agree with you. I think the 49ers have definitely played more physical against the Rams, have been the more physical team on the field when facing the Rams. They've done a great job against the big guy up front, Aaron Donald. I mean, they did a great job against Aaron last season in really controlling him at the line of scrimmage, which is so difficult to do. That's going to be a key. Hey, controlling the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. Hey, we have to get the run game going. We have to be able to run the football and expose this defense in a way that allows us to now get creative in our play action and our movement passing game. Yes, the physicality of Deebo and of Kittle is so important. The yards after catch out of those guys, how they lower and dip the shoulder on people and run through people, creates an energy and emotion and excitement. And the other thing is that they're playing against a quarterback, Stafford, that isn't really playing his best football toward the end of this season. He's made mistakes. He's compromised himself out there on the field. They've been able to overcome it to an extent, but he hasn't played that great. And so hopefully they can get pressure on Stafford. They can force some of those mistakes, get opportunities where it creates an advantage, whether it's a field position opportunity or a defensive touchdown. It's going to be needed. I'm optimistic. I think that the 49ers have so much more to play for. We know the 49ers have so much more to play for in this game. It means more to them to go into this game and win this football game. And because of that emotional edge and the physicality, I'm looking for the win to be for the Niners and to be entering the playoffs in the following week.
Is this your first time at SoFi on Sunday?
It is, yes.
It is awesome. I was there for the Rams game last year, and I had the very unique experience of sitting in the stands alone because there's no fans.
Right.
And I just like looked around, and it was just like, oh my God, what is this going to look like when it's full of fans? And then I went back for the preseason because the 49ers played the Chargers, and I kid you not, 85% 49ers fans. Yeah. I don't think it's going to be that many on Sunday, but I think it's going to be over 50 because it has been at the Coliseum.
Right.
So,
you know, I have an old man football game in the morning. I had to move it to 8 a.m. so I could get on and get to SoFi and make sure my little girl, she's a 49er fan. She's the one that, supports her daddy. So this was her birthday gift. I told her I would take her to a Niner game because she's been begging me all season long. Dad, I want to go to a Niners game. So I'm like, all right, honey, we're going. We're going to go see them against the Rams. And it's going to be exciting to be at a game that has this sort of meaning to it, this sort of importance to it, and the rivalry between the two teams, the energy, the excitement in that stadium is going to be awesome.
That's awesome. And you're going to be wearing your own jersey? Do you wear a jersey to a game? I don't know how it works for an ex-player.
Yeah, it's tough for me to really throw on. I'll have a hat or something. My daughter she goes this morning because my boys go, I wonder what jersey should I wear? Because they have Kittle, they have Bosa, they have some of the other guys, the current players. And my daughter goes, I'm wearing the old man's jersey.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Who's the old man? And she's like, you, Daddy, I'm wearing the old man's jersey.
That's too good. But hey, that's got to get you fired up. And, thanks so much for your time. It's awesome to catch up and reminisce. I think I might have last seen you in person at the Super Bowl, which is crazy. Seems like a decade ago. So Thank you, Jeff. And maybe we'll see you on Sunday.
Sounds good, man. You got it. Take care, David.